Remembrance Day, and across the country at 11 a.m. there were ceremonies, there were moments of silence, and there was a remembrance of things past. We stopped thinking about modernity. We put our cell phones and our emails away just for a moment to think about how things were, but something new crept into the recognition of Remembrance Day, and I've heard of this popping up all over the country, the opposite of remembrance, where instead of thinking about the way things were, we're sort of trying to add or hijack the ceremonies. Take a look at this video by our friend Joe Warmington of Toronto Sun, and tell me if you can detect the stowaway, the interloper, the new addition to these Remembrance Day ceremonies. Take a listen.
I now wish to invite Cadets Flight Sergeant Minialov and Warrant Officer 2nd Class Rainford to share the land and ancestral acknowledgement with us.
We acknowledge the land we are meeting on as our traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We also acknowledge the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands.
We acknowledge all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery.
Thank you.
You can hear someone shouting, and I am certain it's someone shouting their outrage at a Remembrance Day ceremony for the dead being transformed into a land back acknowledgement. And something that I haven't seen before is the accusation that Canada was a participant in the transatlantic slave trade. This is tantamount to a funeral. We attend, we're somber, we have a moment of silence. It's like a funeral because indeed it is a recognition of tens of thousands of Canadians who died. And someone thought they'd graft on their little woke saying. Here's another angle of that same Toronto cenotaph, this one filmed by our friend Caryma Sa'd, who shows the man who was upset. And it's hard to hear what he said, but the timing of it, I think he was outraged that instead of talking about Remembrance Day, some woke, I'm surprised they didn't talk about Sankofa Square. As you know, they've renamed Yonge and Dundas Square, Sankofa Square, after some tribe in Ghana. Here's another angle on the same protest. I'm calling it a protest because one man protested the land acknowledgements. Take a look.
Thank you. The visual sentries today. The sentries are wearing period uniforms from the First and Second World Wars and current day. They are led by Warrant Officer Duff. Should you wish to follow today's program on your own device, you can find it online at toronto.ca/Let's Leave From There.
No, it's not fair to him. It's not fair to him.
Please
It's not fair to him.
Please don't impede my movement.
Singing of our national anthem, which will be followed by the last toast. The silence, the lament.
very interesting. I had not seen the full clip. The man leaving, someone tried to block Caryma's cameraman and said, give him privacy, give the heckler privacy, which was an interesting reaction. And it looked like about half a dozen cops were following him. I was wondering if they were going to arrest him. It looked like they were just seeing that he left the entire vicinity. Joining us now via Skype is our friend Caryma Sa'd. Caryma, that was a very interesting, I mean, listen, Remembrance Day is about Remembrance Day, and it was first hijacked by a land back acknowledgement and a slavery declaration. And then this man heckled, I think, in response. We should focus on the day, but let's talk a little bit about these two interruptions. What do you think of it all?
So I will say that in years past, at the same ceremony in Toronto at the Old City Hall Cenotaph, there have been even more extensive land acknowledgements of anti-Black racism, things that drew a public reaction. And so this year, by comparison to previous years I've attended, was short. But I would agree with you that the timing of this gentleman's outburst, it seems that he was objecting to starting off the ceremony that way. And it's a pity that we weren't able to catch up with him and sort of get some more insight into what was going through his mind.
I don't have any family members who fell in the war, but if I did, I would be thinking about them and who they were and the memory of them. And it would tick me off if someone would start the whole remembrance by talking about slavery, which I'm sure, I mean, just historically speaking, slavery in Canada was a very minor affair. It was rooted out decades before Canada became an independent country. There was no significant slave trade in Canada. To be quite candid, the number one slaveholders in Canada were Indian bands, especially the Haida and the Mohawks. To have that aspersion dumped on Remembrance Day would be like, it reminds me a tiny bit of the fundamental, that church, I forget the name of it's a quirky offshoot of a church that protests at funerals with signs that says God hates fags. That's what their signs say.
The Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah, Westboro Baptist Church. And like, it feels like not the place to take care of other political business. What do you think?
I think what's happened with land acknowledgements is that they have become rote and pretty much boilerplate, and they start off everything from school board meetings, police board meetings, and obviously this Remembrance Day ceremony. And I think that diminishes any effect that would otherwise be intended. Now, as for the intended effect and how or why that became part of the rituals that we engage in as a society, I will say I asked people on X what their thoughts were. Does this enhance or distract? Enhance in the sense of maybe there is space to hold all types of thoughts, and remember beyond just the sort of narrow scope of Remembrance Day. And then on the flip side, distract, because Remembrance Day is a ceremony specifically for this. And, there is I think it's on November 8th, the Indigenous Veterans Remembrance, right? So there is also kind of a separate ceremony that's dedicated for that. So the general consensus, and mind you, it's obviously not a statistically, there's no methodology to this apart from asking people who were online and saw it. But the general consensus seems to be that this is a distraction, and they would prefer to see less of these performative types of actions, and kind of a return to a focus on the core, what this day is about, or what it's always been about.
Yeah. You know, the two major wars, Canada participated a little bit in the Boer War and a little bit in the Korean War, but the two major wars in terms of casualties were the First and Second World Wars. So that's 1914 and 1918. No one who participated in World War I had any connection to slavery. Slavery, what little of it there was in Canada, was outlawed almost 100 years earlier. It's just, you're right to say those land acknowledgements are so hollow and boilerplate, and I don't even think people think deeply about them, except for, we see in British Columbia now, they sort of mean it. So, the courts are saying, oh, maybe we will give the land back. And there's new swaths of land in British Columbia where Aboriginal title has been discovered by the courts. I don't know. I think it's a distraction. But everyone else there in the crowd looked very sober and very dedicated to it. Other than the land back acknowledgement and the heckler, it looked like a very sober affair, and it looked like a dignified affair.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. Everyone was there and, silently paying their respects and following along with kind of the, how the agenda was set by the organizers.
I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit surprised that there were no pro-Hamas people there or pro-Palestine people, and there's both in Toronto. I'm sort of surprised that flag was not unfurled or something. Maybe those folks know that would have been a massive PR backfire. I've seen that happen before. Someone who was a Taliban supporter presented at a Remembrance Day, but it actually looked like either by their own good judgment or police action, they were kept away from the Remembrance Day ceremony. At least I didn't see any.
No, there was nothing of that nature. And that's been consistently the case, at least in Toronto, every year since October 7. There's been no disruptions, with the exception of I think it was 2023, there was a lone individual who took an opportunity to denounce war during the moment of silence, which wasn't very well received by the people around her.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough line there because, of course, the horror of war is one of the lessons of Remembrance Day, but to be a pacifist in that moment does feel contrary to the spirit of it. Hey, let me ask you about one more thing. First of all, thanks for that footage. It was very unique footage that you and your team got. Let me turn back the clock a couple of days till I think it was on Sunday. Every Sunday for a couple of years now, there's been dueling protests on Bathurst Street and Shepherd, which is actually near where I live. And I got arrested there once for not leaving when the cops told me to. Anyways, the Jewish protests, which supported Israel and waved Israeli flags, they called it quits. I think the ceasefire and the return of the hostages marked the end of their rationale, so they said. But the pro-Palestine, and I think some of them are pro-Hamas protesters, are still going. You and your camera team were there. Let's just take a look at what this protest did. It looked like there was nothing for them to do at that street corner. So they started going down a residential street and sort of heckling and haggling with Jewish residents in a Jewish neighborhood. Here, let's take a look.
Fleeing of its population that have no plans of return since the creation of this fake state in 1948. Whoa. Her population is dwindling by the second.
Genocide no more! Oh, fuck yourself. This is public, this is public. You don't own it. This is not...
Get lost.
We're gonna stand here, we're gonna stand here.
Guys, just go. Just get down here. Let's go.
Yeah, you teach your kids how to kill babies? Yeah? A Zionist? You don't own this. This is not occupied Palestine, okay?
I actually do need to get my car to the driveway.
Yeah, we're over here. Be a decent human being. Be a decent human being. Teach your kids how to be decent humans. Teach them not how to kill babies like Zionists do, okay?
I'm not the one intimidating people.
No one intimidating no one. You're the one intimidating us by telling us to move along.
I am the one.
Yeah.
You have no reason to move.
Stop threatening us, okay? Stop.
Now, Kareem, on one hand, I'm a free speech guy. I really am, and I try really hard to be consistent, even for people I disagree with. And on the one hand, walking on a public street, not trespassing on private property, not uttering threats, well, that's something that I do, and that's something I want to protect. On the other hand, when you're walking into a Jewish neighborhood because it's a Jewish neighborhood and your goal is to antagonize and harass, I don't know, but that seems to be like it's coming up on harassment. Now, you're out in public, you can take a heckle or two. It's not a crime. But I'm worried that this group of professional protesters that shows up every Sunday chanting their support for, well, in some cases, Hamas, I think that they're trying to cause a ruckus with mums and dads in the Jewish community, in the neighborhood, who have nothing to do with Israel or politics. They're just Jewish. What do you think?
So, as you noted at the outset, there have consistently been pro-Israel supporters, and that was an outlet for this group to sort of direct their expression. This week, that didn't happen. And so I believe that is why we saw a departure from the norm and a group set out into the residential area, looking to do what? Were they hoping to run into someone? Were they, planning to get a different kind of footage that they can use for their videos? I can't sort of comment on what the intention was, but what actually happened was they did, in fact, run into this lady and her family, as we saw, and it kind of devolved. It wasn't a productive conversation of any sort. And what's striking about all of this is that there was a significant police presence. There usually has been for the past 2 years. And this week, with no pro-Israel demonstration to sort of manage, I thought it was an interesting choice for police to just sort of stay in the positions that they were and not follow along to ensure that there's no breach of the peace, whether from protesters or if someone, is antagonized by seeing them and acts out inappropriately. Regardless, there should have been a police presence, I think, just given the track record of this intersection.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the police were there. I don't quite know why they didn't walk into these residential neighborhoods. Here's James Pasternak, the local city councilor, who was just outraged by that. Take a look.
I'm standing in the corner of Bathurst and Shepherd on a weekday, and things are quiet now. And that's the way we want it to be. We want protesters to find somewhere else to gather. We want the anti-Israel protesters to stay away. There's no embassy here. There's no consulates here. There's no government buildings here. There's no city squares here. This is a residential neighborhood, and we want you to stop coming up here and harassing the Jewish community. So let's keep things calm. Let's let police do what they have to do, and law enforcement in the other parts of the city, and let's stay away from Bathurst and Shepherd on Sunday.
Well, Caryma, very interesting stuff. I love the fact that you are on the street where it happens. Toronto is the biggest city in Canada, and I think it really has a lot of news. We have Alexa Lavoie on the ground in Montreal who's showing us similar things. Very crazy. You call your series of reports Protest Mania. I think that is a good name for it.
It's inspired, of course, by my love of wrestling. And, as they say, wrestling is life, but it truly is in the context of protests where you have kind of extremes and things are not always what they appear to be.
Well, listen, it's great to have you. Thanks very much. And thanks for bringing the excellent footage as you always do.
Cheers.
All right, there you go. Caryma Sa'd. Stay with us. Your letters to me next.